Hello YouTubers, welcome to Big Buddha is Watching. I'm Big Buddha and today I've got a lot to get through on this one today, so I'm going to try and squeeze this into just the half hour, because today I'm going to be looking at Red Dwarf Series 7 from 1997, the 19th series. And I will also be discussing Series 12 Episode 4 at the end of the video, Mechocracy. Not M-Corp, that's next week. As I said in the last one, it's Mechocracy this time round. So if you want to see my thoughts on Mechocracy, skip forward to the last 5 minutes of the video. Like before, just to prove my old school fandom, I have dug out the VHS tapes. There's Bite 1, Stoke Me a Clipper. Of course, a pun on Smoke Me a Kipper, Ace Rimmer's catchphrase. Bite 2, that's the cat in Jane Austen gear. And Bite 3, yes, they actually spread over 3 videos this time around, 3 VHS tapes, the episodes, because unlike previous series, there was actually 8 episodes in Series 7 as opposed to Series 1 to 6, which only had 6 episodes apiece. They kept this up for Series 8 as well, so there was 8 episodes in Series 8 as well. 3 in 9, and then from 10 onwards they've gone back to the 6 format. So this, so there was 3 episodes on Bite 1 and Bite 2, and then there's a bit of filler on the back. They stuck in episodes 7 and 8 and the Red Dwarf A to Z, which was like a short little documentary that they did where fans talked about their favourite Red Dwarf moments. That was originally broadcast on Red Dwarf Night in 1998 to mark the 10-year anniversary of the show, not the 20-year anniversary, as I said before, the 10-year anniversary. Also, interesting enough, I also own this. I bet this is rare now. This is Red Dwarf 7 Extended, and this contains, interestingly enough, the episodes Tika to Ride, Ouroboros and Duck Soup, with basically the deleted scenes edited back into the body of the episode. These episodes were the only episodes that were solely written by Doug Naylor alone in the series, and he had a habit in those days of writing 35-minute episodes, he says. His justification being that there are many episodes of Fawlty Towers that run way over the 30-minute mark. There's easily some that run to 34, 35 minutes, and I think the longest is 37 and a half minutes. So he didn't understand why he was penalised and made to edit all these down. So this is interesting to see. I mean, they are available obviously as special features on the DVD now, but this VHS sort of predates special features. It also contains the Smeg-Ups for Series 7 as well, and the full-length version of the Rimmer Munchkin song. Again, all on the DVD. Interesting enough as well, the unedited versions of those episodes, they appear without laughter track on both the VHS and the DVD, and it's the episodes that have the commentaries on if you watch the DVD, because series 1 to 9 all had commentaries from the cast on them. And also as well, the main difference look-wise to this series as opposed to at least all the ones that have gone before is this utilised that technique that was becoming more and more popular in sitcoms at the time, where they shot it on standard tape, but then they would change, I think, the frame format from 24 a second to 22 or something like that, so it gave video a slightly filmic look, especially when there was movement. Of course, digital video now, everything looks like it's shot on film, right from sitcoms right through to big movies, and so everything kind of has the same look now. And Red Dwarf has always been a program that strove for a more, the most state-of-the-art cinematic look that it could get. I mention this now because the extended versions, though, the title sequence doesn't have that filmic look. It has the frame rate put back up to 24 a second, just to give you an indication of what the series would have looked like had it had a more consistent look with the rest of the series. I don't know why they didn't keep that format, because I know that this is the series where they were starting to make inroads to making a movie. And so they were moving more and more towards that. This is the reason that Kochanski is brought back as one of the main characters in Series 3. It wasn't because Chris Barry was leaving. If Chris Barry had stayed, they would have brought Kochanski in as a character anyway. The reason they brought her back is because they thought it would be easier to secure funding if Red Dwarf had at least one female cast member. Apparently films with solely male cast members are more difficult to sell, or the general public just don't take to them. At least this was the thinking at the time. So that was the reason behind them bringing Kochanski back as a character. They recast her from Claire Grogan from Altered Images from Series 1 and 2, and briefly in 6. And they recast her with Chloe Annette and stuck her in a red PVC outfit, a sort of a sort of nod to Emma Peel in the Avengers. Because they needed a babe. They needed someone who would look good on the cinema screen. A malign character, really, Kochanski. She was in Series 7 she did come across as a bit uptight. Doug Naylor puts this down to the fact that she just wasn't very physically comfortable in the PVC outfit under studio light. She was kind of hot and sweaty the whole time, which is why they ditched the outfit in Series 8. And she does come across as far more likeable in Series 8. She was growing on me in Series 8, and again, like Hattie Hatred, she's kind of missed. She's missed by me as well. I'll hold my hands up and admit it. I really fancied her after Gillian Anderson. She was one of my top 90s pinups, Chloe Annette, and I think she's a bit of a babe, and she was quite funny as well. But it can't be denied that she was a little uptight, and it's difficult with an actor when they replace characters in sitcoms, because invariably you get an actor who's finding their feet in a role, and you're ditching a character who's firmly established in the role and has well found his feet and knows the character inside and out, as Chris Barry was, and knew how to turn on a dime to mine the character for comic potential. So there's always that sort of new paint of coat of paint feeling when a new character comes in, and sadly audiences just don't have the patience to see a character develop and realise the full potential before they dismiss them. Chris Barry, he certainly took a good season to find Rimmer and really make the character engaging. He comes across as quite unlikable in the first series, and then Chris Barry sort of figured out a way to make that unlikability likable in the end. And I believe Chloe Annette would have really found her feet if she'd been allowed to continue as one of the main cast members. So, like Series 3, this really was a sort of overhaul format, and the Series 6 to some extent. After the 3-year break, we essentially, well, the first couple of episodes, we settled back into the same format as Series 6. So the resolution is to the cliffhanger that Series 6 was left on is almost done away with in the prologue, where Lister explains the what I always expected would be the explanation that if you go back into the past and kill yourself, you won't exist in the future to kill yourself. So the paradox sort of sorts itself out, and they use. It's kind of, I never really liked the actual explanation scene where. Because it just sound like total sci-fi geeky exposition where Lister's just explaining it into the camera, and it's so complicated that it blows the camera up. Much like I'm thinking that my camera here is going to blow up from me explaining this too much. So yeah, it is a little exposition heavy, but they do. Doug Naylor does sort of utilise the time dilation thing to explain why. Starbug is now, has almost a design overhaul to how it looked in Series 6. The kitchen has got a lot bigger. The bunk room and the science rooms upstairs are now much bigger. Starbug in Series 7 was really. Had sort of grown to a fully functioning spaceship, almost on a par with Red Dwarf itself. So, the writing on the wall for the return of Red Dwarf was there. You thought, well, if necessity has meant that Starbug has, being sort of re-envisioned as just a pokey little engine craft, which was just an engine room in Series 3 and has grown to this vast, huge ship, then they may as well bring the vast, huge ship back, which, spoiler, they do in Episode 8. So that was the big overhaul. Obviously, Chris Barry, people forget... people have forgotten that really, Chris Barry in the 90s, believe it or not, was the highest paid comedy star 1 year. I mean, he was above Rowan Atkinson on British TV. I'm talking here because he had another successful sitcom called The British Empire, which I haven't watched for years. I remember really liking it as a kid, but I suspect it did have a kind of kids program element to it. It was kind of Fawlty Towers light in a way, and he played a very irritating tit in it called Gordon Brittis, the owner of a sports centre. My memory of it was that the first 5 series were pretty good, pretty funny, but then they made a mistake. The writers didn't want to do it anymore, so then they decided to make a couple more series with a different writing staff, and don't want to talk to them, go away. And so they made a couple more series with a different writing staff, and it wasn't as good. I think that was really Chris Barry's downfall for being a big comedy star, because after that he went on to do another sitcom called A Prince Among Men with the same writing staff that had taken over from the previous writing staff on the British Empire, my memory was that A Prince Among Men wasn't very good as well. So it was kind of the sort of Tony Hancock syndrome, really, that I think Chris Barry kind of felt he was a big enough star that his own comedy talent would carry him through. But Chris Barry, unfortunately, is only ever been as good as the scripts that he's been given. When he had writers like Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, and the writers of the original British Empire, whose names just escape me. The name Andrew Norris is in my head, and I can't remember the other guy's name. But I'll have to look that one up. But I think he really should have stood by those writers and respected their decision to carry on writing for him, but done another sitcom for him or whatever they wanted to do. The reason I'm mentioning the British Empire in this and the Prince Among Men is I think that's his decision to leave was partly, I think, down to the fact that he felt he was a big enough comedy star to leave Red Dwarf. He wanted to leave the BBC Two sitcom and become a BBC One star. However, he did say that filming Series 7 was the most fun he'd ever had, really, on working on a project, which is why he only ever left for 4 episodes in the end. He leaves in episode 2, but then he does have a cameo appearance in episode 3, and he's peppered throughout episode 5 as well in flashbacks and fantasy sequences. So in all, he's only ever absent for 4 episodes, Chris Barrie. But the change of character from Chris Barrie leaving, Rimmer leaving, and Chloe Annette coming in was obviously a big overhaul for the format. Returning this series was Ed Bye, and like I said, it was the first time he directed since series 4, and again, they brought in the more filmic look to say, look, this could be a motion picture. Still waiting. And the other big change that came along was the fact that this is the only series, despite the odd episode here and there, that was filmed entirely single camera, i.e. no studio audience. They shot this one like a film. Again, something else they reverted back to in Series 8, being that they brought the studio audience back, because at least Doug Naylor felt that the performances that the cast gave. Oh, sorry, I tell a lie. Back to Earth, of course, was filmed without a studio audience, but that was through necessity, really, because they hadn't made the show for so long. Doug Naylor felt that the audiences, although the performances from the cast, although were more well honed, they lost something when you didn't have the actors essentially showing off to an audience and performing to the rafters. So that was the other big change that came along. But the biggest change, if you ask me, and let's address the elephant in the room now, was the sad breaking up of the writing partnership of Rob Grant and Doug Naylor. Comedy partnerships famously don't last forever, well, some don't, For every Morecambe and Wise, there's a Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. For every Clement and Lafreniere, there's Newman and Baddiel. And sadly, Rob Grant and Doug Naylor, for whatever reasons, they decided. I think it was more Rob Grant's decision. His only real sort of concrete quote on the matter was that he didn't want to go to his grave with just Red Dwarf on his tombstone. So he left the writing partnership, and Doug Naylor was really faced with the decision whether to leave it at 6 series. But no, he passionately felt that there was more life in the programme, and there was a chance that to do a film, and he really wanted to do a film. So that's really why we got Series 7 and 8, because it was a dry run for a movie, and Doug Naylor wanted to prove that he could go it alone as a writer, or as the writer of Red Dwarf. Now, Series 7 is unique in that Doug Naylor really didn't feel confident at first, it's obvious, about writing alone. So it's the only series that really had a writing staff on it. Doug Naylor has a co-authorship on every episode in Series 7, and indeed an authorship credit on every single episode to date. But Series 7 was the only series really that utilised the sort of American format of a showrunner essentially giving the overall storylines or coming up with storylines and then handing them on to other writers who would go away to pen the scripts. But invariably, because Red Dwarf really became Doug Naylor's baby from this point on, he did, I think, end up really sort of penning most of the series himself, because other writers just, comedy writers just didn't have the science background, didn't have the science fiction background that he'd accumulated at this point. So, although he is a co-author on all of them, I think a large part of the material is down to Doug Naylor. I should mention actually that the writer Paul Alexander, who co-authored the episode 2 Stoke Me a Clipper, episode 7 Epidime, and episode 8 Nanarchy, also has a co-authorship episode on a couple of episodes in series 8. But since series 8, since Back to Earth, it's been solely a Doug Naylor pen show ever since. The other writers on this series who were drafted in, I think a lot of them had worked previously with Rob and Doug on things like Carrot's Lib in the past and Spitting Image, and so they good comedy writers. As well as Paul Alexander, you also had Kim Fuller, who was a very prolific comedy writer in the 80s. He wrote a lot for Lenny Henry. He co-wrote the episode Blue, and you had James Hendry, who co-wrote the episode Nanarchy, the episode 8. I think he would go on to write for My Family and things like that. There are other British shows that try and utilise the writer's room format. And of course, the other writer on this series was Robert Llewellyn, who wrote episode 6 Beyond a Joke, the only member of the cast to have written an episode to date. Although I know Craig Charles was very keen to write an episode on series 8, but that never transpired when Doug Naylor decided he wanted to be the sole writer again on the series. So I say let's address the elephant in the room. Do I think that Red Dwarf, quality-wise, was really as good after Rob Grant was left? And yeah, I mean, to be brutally honest, no, I don't. No, not that I ever hated it. It's been going for a lot longer. Well, they've now clocked up as many series and probably more episodes actually without Rob Grant than with Rob Grant. But for me, I don't think that although any new series of Red Dwarf that comes along will always be avid viewing on the day of broadcast or the week before broadcast in a lot of cases for me. But but that's really I know that's down to a nostalgia I have for series 1 to 6. If series 7 had been series 1, I don't think it would be my favourite show. Not that I wouldn't have necessarily thought it was a bad show. Doug Naylor is a great comedy writer. He can write. He's written some of my favourite gags in any sitcom ever, and I know that from the jokes that he's come up with in series 7. He is a really strong comedy writer. But Rob, probably a stronger comedy writer actually than Rob Grant, who from his solo work I got the impression that Doug Naylor was the sort of solid gag writer. He really became up with the one-liners for the series, and Rob Grant was sort of stronger on the more I think the gross out jokes were really Rob Grant's baby. But for me, I think Rob Grant was better on the science fiction. And as I've said before, the science fiction of Red Dwarf is the main draw for me over the comedy. You know, Doug Naylor, he tries, bless him, and he has come up with some good ideas, but it's never really engaged my imagination, Red Dwarf, since Rob Grant left. Yeah, and as I said before, the imaginative sci-fi, the conceptual stuff was always the main draw for me when I was younger. I don't think, you know, say for just purely as example, a concept like the Inquisitor, or a concept like polymorph. I mean, those are really imaginative concepts, you know, concepts that could almost hold their own movie. And you don't really get those kind of storylines in Red Dwarf anymore. And I think that's what Red Dwarf really lost when they lost Rob Grant from the writing partnership, sadly. So, yeah, I don't want to be too harsh on the program, because I don't hate it, but for me it is a lesser work from Series 7 onwards, and that's how I will be looking at it from now on. So that's all I really wanted to say on that. So I think I covered everything. That was a long-winded one there. I'm not looking at that. What am I looking at? So I think this one's. I think this one is going to be a two-parter. I didn't think it would be, but because we've got 9 episodes to review now. In fact, yeah, let's make it a two-parter. I'm going to end this video here. So join me in part 2 when I'll be looking at the episodes individually, and also my review of Mechocracy. I know I said it would be the end of this video, but I'll put it in the title. You know, it'll be the end of the next video. So join me then, folks. Join me then.